At 28 years old, I look back on my tumultuous childhood, shaped by the stark contrast between my upbringing and that of my twin brother. From a young age, it was evident that our parents held a bias that favored him, a bias that would ultimately lead to years of emotional turmoil for me. While my brother was celebrated and groomed for what they believed was a path to greatness, I was often dismissed as the black sheep of the family. Rather than focusing on academics, I found joy in sports and socializing, and this disinterest in traditional success made me an easy target for their criticism. The disparity in the attention given to my brother and myself was glaring. On our shared birthday, for instance, he would host extravagant parties filled with friends, laughter, and gifts. I felt like a mere afterthought, quietly observing the festivities without any acknowledgement of my presence. Sleepovers were a privilege I was never afforded. My brother's friends were always welcome, but my attempts to invite a friend over were met with resistance, leaving me feeling isolated and unwanted. Throughout this time, the only glimmer of support in my family came from my grandmother. Unlike my parents, she took time to nurture me, often bringing my favorite chocolates on visits and discreetly gifting me money to spend, recognizing my struggles and offering me small moments of joy amidst the chaos. However, as I grew older, the favoritism became more pronounced and morphed into an oppressive cycle of emotional abuse. My parents were not just dismissive, they became openly mocking, belittling my grades and ridiculing my interests. No matter how hard I tried, I felt inadequate and incapable of meeting their expectations. Even my natural talent in sports was stifled. They forbade me from joining any teams or clubs, insisting that I focus solely on my studies to mirror my brother's path. The turning point came during my sophomore year when, after being grounded for having downloaded Snapchat, a seemingly innocent app to communicate with friends, my world came crashing down. My parents reacted with outrage, tearing apart my personal space in a fit of anger, as if I had committed a grave sin. They removed my bedroom door from its hinges, stripping away my privacy and autonomy, making it clear that as long as I lived under their roof, I would be subject to their draconian rules. What compounded this nightmare was my brother's betrayal. Instead of standing by me, he seized upon the toxic environment our parents had fostered. He began to exploit the situation for his own gain, weaving a web of falsehoods that cast me as the villain in our family saga. My brother would fabricate stories about my supposed misdeeds, shifting blame onto me when he misbehaved. If something went missing, I was often the target of his accusations. He found pleasure in undermining me, taunting me in front of my friends and making hurtful comments about my appearance, feeding off my parents' misguided belief in his victimhood. Despite these challenges, I built a solid circle of friends at school. My open and approachable nature made it easy for me to form connections, a stark contrast to my brother, who struggled socially. This dynamic fueled his resentment and jealousy. The tension reached a climax on our 14th birthday. While my brother faced the humiliation of no one showing up for his party, my friends rallied around me, celebrating with ice cream and making me feel cherished. The stark contrast left my brother seething with jealousy, leading him to take revenge in the most sinister way. He resorted to spreading vile rumors about me at school, painting a picture of a spoiled and abusive sister. He claimed I was physically harming him at home, an unfathomable lie that he escalated to dangerous levels. In a shocking display of manipulation, he inflicted injuries on himself, punching himself to create visible bruises that he would flaunt at school, pretending they were evidence of my supposed violence. When confronted by our parents, he spun elaborate tales, maintaining his innocence while making it seem like those injuries were a result of innocent activities like football games. This web of lies, expertly crafted by my twin, not only deepened my isolation but also left lasting scars on my self-esteem and mental well-being. Ultimately, it taught me the harsh realities of favoritism, betrayal, and the lengths to which people can go to maintain their narratives, especially when it comes at the expense of family. The experience has shaped who I am today, someone who understands the value of resilience and the strength that comes from overcoming adversity. The incident began quite innocently, with a group of us gathered to play football in the park, laughter and excitement filling the air. However, soon after, rumors about me started to spread, specifically claims regarding black eyes I supposedly had. These allegations, rooted in my brother's distorted version of events, began to take on a life of their own. As these lies circulated, more and more people began to believe them, turning a simple misunderstanding into a pervasive narrative that painted me as someone I was not. It didn't take long for whispers to start drifting through the hallways of my school. Friends who had once been close to me suddenly began to look at me with suspicion as if I were the villain in a story that I didn't even know I was part of. At first, the changes were subtle. Casual conversations that used to be frequent became rare moments of awkwardness. Invitations to hang out diminished, and the camaraderie that once flourished between us dissipated like smoke. It felt like a switch had been flipped, leaving me branded as the spoiled girl, accused of violence, and everyone seemed to hesitate to associate with me. One day, overwhelmed by these changes, I gathered my courage to confront my ex-best friend. I needed to understand why the dynamics had shifted so drastically. When I asked her, she opened up in a way that shocked me. She revealed how my twin brother had been spreading false rumors about me, claiming that I had done things I would never even dream of. The weight of her words was crushing. I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. The realization hit me hard. My brother, someone I had grown up with and trusted, was lying about me and accusing me of actions that were far removed from my true character. This betrayal cut deep, leaving me with a knot in my stomach and a heavy heart that seemed impossible to lift. Determined to confront my brother and seek some semblance of clarification, I approached him the next day at school. My heart raced with a mix of anxiety and urgency, but he chose to ignore me as if I were invisible. Desperate, I begged him to stop spreading lies about me, hoping for some shred of compassion. Instead, a smirk crossed his face and he coldly told me that I deserved to rot alone. His words left me speechless and filled with a growing fear. His behavior was becoming increasingly alarming, and the thought of confiding in my parents filled me with dread. I worried that they might believe him over me, despite knowing the truth. The isolation I felt was unbearable. I had always prided myself on being open and friendly, yet it seemed my brother's jealousy and malicious lies were systematically dismantling the relationships I had carefully nurtured over the years. The impact of these rumors reached beyond my peers. Even teachers began to catch wind of the story. It was surreal, almost like living in a distorted reality where the genuine me was overshadowed by a malevolent narrative spun by my own twin. These lies evolved from mere teenage gossip into serious accusations that began to shape how others perceived me. The situation escalated further when the principal caught wind of the rumors and summoned me, my brother, and our parents to his office. I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest as the principal demanded the unvarnished truth. In that moment, I held on to a flicker of hope that my brother would come clean and put an end to the madness. However, to my utter disbelief, he solidified the fabrications, telling the principal that the rumors were indeed true. He painted me as a bully who unleashed violence on him when our parents weren't around, spinning a twisted tale that left me reeling. I was shocked and felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath me. My brother continued to weave this elaborate story, alleging that I was angry and resentful due to him receiving more love from our parents. This narrative was entirely fictitious, yet he clung to it as if his life depended on it. My mother's tears began to flow as she heard his accusations, clinging to him as though he were a hero in distress. My father, in an attempt to comfort my brother, praised him for his supposed bravery in speaking out, offering reassurances that he would ensure nothing would ever happen to him. As I listened to these lies, I felt a deep sense of urgency to defend myself. I pleaded with the principal, desperate to convey that everything my brother said was fabricated. But it felt as though I were drowning in a sea of accusations, doing everything I could to keep my head above water while my brother continued to reinforce the damaging narrative. My mother's emotional turmoil compounded the situation, as she held onto my brother tightly, casting me accusatory glances filled with doubt. In the midst of this, the principal reprimanded me harshly, stating the school's zero-tolerance policy for bullying and informing me that I was to be suspended. My heart sank further at the thought of being punished for something I didn't do. I begged him not to suspend me, tears streaming down my face, trying to convey the truth of my innocence. But his response was unwavering. He insisted that he couldn't overlook the allegations and that the suspension was necessary to send a message against bullying. The gravity of the situation hit me hard, and I broke down, feeling utterly helpless. In that moment, I was left feeling as if I were fighting a losing battle against lies that had taken root and grown into a complex web of misinformation. Tears streamed down my face as I practically begged him to reconsider, to see things from my perspective. My parents, feeling a mix of anger and embarrassment over the entire situation, forcibly dragged me out of the principal's office. I resisted, unwilling to leave, desperate to plead my case and make them understand the truth behind what had happened. But they were resolute, dismissing my cries for help. We exited the school, my heart feeling heavy with a toxic blend of frustration and humiliation. When we arrived home, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. My dad, out of nowhere, began packing up my belongings. I was stunned, caught completely off guard and confused, unable to comprehend what was unfolding before me. My mom, baffled by his actions, questioned him, but he only responded with a furious outburst, declaring that I could no longer live under the same roof as my brother. The gravity of the situation crashed down on me as I sank to my knees, sobbing uncontrollably. I turned to my brother, pleading with him to tell our parents the truth, but he remained cold and unyielding, unaffected by my emotional turmoil. As my dad continued to shove my things into a suitcase, he hurled it into the foyer, and I found myself clinging desperately to his legs, begging him not to throw me out. This was not just a disagreement, it felt like a nightmare taking shape right before my eyes. He claimed that a bully like me had no place in his house and threatened to call my grandmother to come and take me away. My world felt like it was crumbling beneath me, shattered by this unexpected betrayal as I stood there, frozen in shock, surrounded by my belongings scattered in the foyer of my own home. Eventually, my grandmother arrived, and her presence brought a flicker of hope amid the chaos. She gathered my things and assisted me in placing them in the car, checking to ensure that I was buckled safely into the passenger seat. With an air of determination, she approached my parents' front door and rang the bell. When my dad opened the door, she unleashed a torrent of anger at him, confronting him for treating me so harshly. With stern resolve, she warned him that if he ever tried to approach me again, she would not hesitate to involve the police or child protective services, emphasizing that his actions could land him in jail. In a desperate attempt to deflect blame, my mother remarked that the situation was all my fault, but my grandmother stood her ground, unwavering in her defense. She insisted that I was just a child who deserved compassion, not cruelty. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of how powerful my grandmother truly was. She did not cower to my parents. Unlike them, she believed in me, supporting me when I most needed it. As we drove away, leaving behind the only home I had ever known, I struggled to articulate the indescribable pain that engulfed me. Upon arriving at my grandmother's house, I remember collapsing onto the bed, tears flowing freely, refusing to eat despite her persistent encouragement to take care of myself. I confided in her about my brother's betrayal, and her shocked response reassured me that I was not alone. At least I had one person who believed my side of the story. When the 10-day suspension finally ended, the thought of returning to school felt like stepping into a lion's den. As I walked through the familiar hallways, the eyes of my classmates conveyed a multitude of unspoken words, judgment, hostility, and disdain. It was as if the air was thick with lingering accusations that clung to me with every step I took. Meanwhile, my brother had turned his back on me, aligning himself with those who believed his version of events and painting himself as the victim of my so-called attacks. No matter how fervently I tried to communicate my truth, my words fell on deaf ears. I now wore the unjust label of an outcast, and it followed me like an ominous shadow. In the classroom, the cafeteria, and the corridors, I felt the weight of disdain from those who once regarded me as a friend. I became a lone figure, keeping my head down, attending my classes with a heavy heart, and eating lunch in solitude at a distant table. I was no longer part of the vibrant community I once knew. My parents never even thought to check on me during this time, leaving me to grapple with the emotional fallout alone. Yet my grandmother consistently reminded me that none of this was my fault and that life would eventually improve. Despite the challenges, I managed to graduate high school with good grades, an accomplishment that gave me a glimmer of hope for the future. I looked ahead to college, where I dreamed of finding a fresh start and a better life, free from the shadows of my past. It was during my time in college that I truly felt the essence of freedom for the very first time. No longer was I under the watchful eyes of family or friends, scrutinizing my every move and dissecting my academic performance. Gone were the comparisons of grades and the relentless competition that had marked my earlier years. In this new environment, I had the opportunity to meet a diverse group of individuals who shared similar interests and aspirations. Despite the emotional and physical scars I had carried with me from my past experiences with family and peers, I was determined to leave those burdens behind and fully immerse myself in the college experience. As I settled into this new chapter of my life, I discovered a passion for content writing that I hadn't fully explored before. Writing had always been a dream of mine, but I had hesitated to pursue it seriously, uncertain about its viability as a long-term career. However, in the spirit of earning some side income while in school, I decided to embrace freelance writing. I signed up for various freelancing platforms, which opened doors to opportunities with reputable clients. This initiative allowed me to gradually build a portfolio, showcasing my work and expertise. Throughout my college years, I maintained this side hustle without ever needing financial assistance from my parents. Upon graduation, instead of stepping into a corporate job, I realized that I could turn my passion for content writing into a full-time profession. The relationships I had built with multiple clients paid off, as they began to entrust me with ongoing projects, solidifying my standing in the freelance community. This legitimate freelancing career not only granted me financial independence but also afforded me the chance to travel as a digital nomad. As I explored different parts of the world, the experiences helped mend the emotional wounds of my past, providing not only adventure but also a sense of healing. Despite the challenges, I was determined to save as much as possible, taking a leap of faith on myself. Throughout my journeys, my grandmother remained the only person I considered family, and my love for her ran deep. She was understandably saddened when I moved out, but recognized my need for independence. Regardless of my busy schedule, I made it a priority to support her whenever I could. Visiting her on weekends became a cherished tradition, where we would share meals and engage in conversations that spanned from my childhood stories to her latest happenings. I dedicated entire afternoons to aiding her with chores or taking leisurely strolls in the local park, cherishing those moments together. Recently, I completed one of the most significant projects in my career. While I can't disclose the brand, I was fortunate enough to write blogs and product descriptions for them. Once the project wrapped up, I requested positive reviews from the team I collaborated with, and they gladly obliged. I took screenshots of their feedback to share on my Instagram, fully aware that working with this brand was a notable achievement. As anticipated, many fellow content writers reached out to congratulate me on my success, even reposting my story to help amplify the message. This newfound visibility led to inquiries from strangers needing assistance with their websites. My relatives also noticed my progress, reaching out to offer their congratulations. Eventually, I was contacted by my college's principal, who had seen my accomplishments. He invited me to return to campus for a seminar, where I would speak to students about forging a career as a content writer. Although I felt a wave of nerves wash over me at the thought of public speaking, I decided to accept the invitation and take a chance. Standing before a room full of eager faces and sharing my journey was a moment of profound significance. I recounted the struggles I had faced and the dedication that fueled my perseverance through tough times. It was an incredibly fulfilling experience to encourage others and contribute to the collective growth of the writing community. As my speech gained traction, clips from my talk began to go viral in various Facebook groups, resonating with many individuals. Finally being recognized for my hard work felt like a long overdue validation. Just last week, I received an invitation to speak on a local news channel, marking another exciting milestone in my journey. The show was dedicated to exploring the many advantages that come with content writing, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to share my personal journey and insights with their audience. As the time approached for the broadcast, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement about the opportunity to connect with viewers who could benefit from what I had learned throughout my career. During the show, I talked extensively about my various experiences in the field, emphasizing the significance of client reviews and how a simple post expressing appreciation can lead to incredible opportunities. I highlighted how these small gestures not only help in building strong relationships but also in reaching a wider audience and inspiring others who are working in this domain. The prospect of sharing my story and potentially motivating others was both humbling and thrilling. When the episode finally aired, I felt a surge of pride and joy. I shared clips of the interview on my Instagram, excited to showcase this milestone in my career. This was not just a personal achievement for me but also a way to share my progress with friends and family. It turned out to be a pivotal moment, as it finally got the attention of my relatives and cousins, who began to discover how well I was faring professionally. This development was particularly significant because my parents had never spoken to anyone about my work. They had no idea that I was collaborating with popular brands and receiving invitations to TV shows, so this was a revelation for them and an unexpected way for my family to catch up on my journey. Shortly after the show aired, I was deep into another project when my phone was silenced. Once I completed my work, I checked my notifications and was taken aback to see 6 missed calls from my mom. It had genuinely been a long time since I had received a call from her, and I was quite shocked to find her name on my screen. After years of minimal communication, I couldn't comprehend why she would be calling me now. I hesitated but eventually decided to call her back. To my surprise, she picked up right away. I immediately asked if everything was okay, and much to my astonishment, my mom started congratulating me on my accomplishments, which felt surreal. My dad, who was likely sitting beside her, jumped into the conversation, inquiring about my life and well-being. I answered their questions frankly, but the conversation took an unexpected turn when they began to ask about my earnings. This sudden interest in my financial situation raised my eyebrows. I replied that it was none of their business, to which my dad responded, emphasizing that since we were family, I should feel comfortable sharing that information with them. I assured them that I was doing well financially, but that wasn't enough for my mom. She shifted the discussion to their current struggles, expressing how hard life had become for them. As she spoke, a mix of suspicion and confusion filled my mind. Our conversation unfolded something like this. "Mom, we have retired now, and we've been wanting to renovate the house for some time," she said. "It's not in great shape, but we have no savings left." I replied, "Okay, Mom, your success has given us hope. After watching your TV interview today, we thought maybe you could help us out by paying for the renovations." Then my dad chimed in, stating, "After all, we are a family. You shouldn't hesitate to share some of your earnings with us. We could really use your help." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you joking with me? Why are you asking me for money when you haven't even talked to me for years?" I can't understand why you decided to reach out to me now. While I appreciate the congratulations, I am not going to help you out in any way." This response seemed to trigger my mom, who began to accuse me of being selfish and that I should support them as a family. My dad added that as my parents, they deserved my support and that this was the least I could do for them. The sheer frustration coursing through me made it clear I wanted to express my feelings more forcefully, but instead of simply arguing, I formulated a plan to teach them a lesson about their expectations. I told my parents that I would consider helping them if they agreed to meet my demands. Intrigued, my dad asked what those demands were. Without hesitation, I laid them out clearly. If they wanted my assistance, they first had to publicly acknowledge in front of our family and friends that my brother was the mastermind behind the cruel rumors that had tarnished my reputation for so long. I wanted them to experience the same humiliation they had once inflicted upon me by believing his lies and manipulations. This was about holding them accountable for their past actions and recognizing the pain they had caused me. When I explained my condition, my dad began to question why such an admission was necessary. My mom, on the other hand, insisted that this was all quite unnecessary and that we could resolve everything in a private conversation without involving others. I stood my ground firmly, unwavering in my stance. The condition I had set was unequivocal. It was a non-negotiable prerequisite for any future assistance they might seek from me. As the conversation progressed and the tension mounted, my dad's voice grew louder, as if to assert his authority in the situation. He reminded me of his role as my father, insisting that it was my obligation to help my family in times of need. In a desperate bid to sway my decision, my mom chimed in, pleading with me to do the right thing. She reminded me of the years they had devoted to raising me, as if that alone should dictate my actions now. I couldn't help but find a certain irony in their sudden appeal for familial duty. It was hard to forget the past, especially how they had kicked me out when I needed them most. It was my grandmother who had stepped in and taken on the role of parent, not them. I reminded my parents of this crucial fact, stating clearly that the narrative they wanted to construct didn't align with the reality I had experienced. With each passing moment, their agitation grew more palpable. I made it clear that if they sought to reconnect with me and expect my financial assistance moving forward, the truth had to be acknowledged publicly. My brother needed to face the consequences of his actions, and I would not relent on this point. Since that pivotal conversation, my parents have attempted to reach out to me repeatedly, their calls coming incessantly. I have chosen to ignore them, and with each ignored call, my regret about reaching out to them that day grows. I find myself reflecting on whether I would truly be in a difficult position if I chose not to help them at all. An update on this whirlwind of events reveals that it has been an emotionally charged week since I last shared my story. The outpouring of support and encouragement from those around me has been overwhelmingly positive. It's reassuring to realize that I am not alone during this challenging time. Many have echoed the sentiment that I should distance myself from my parents and avoid any thought of helping them after everything they put me through. The reason I laid down such a condition in the first place was because I sensed it would be nearly impossible for them to meet it. Their love for my brother runs deep, and even if they've started to uncover the truth about his lies, I doubt they would ever hold him accountable in the same way they did me. Today, my brother sent me a particularly nasty text message, fueled by frustration after my parents once again tried to contact me and I refused to engage. His message was dripping with disdain. "Hey sis, it's been a long time since I saw you, and I can tell you that every day without you in my life has been great. I heard that mom and dad reached out to you and you gave them a crazy ultimatum. They are never going to go through with it, you know that, right? They clearly never loved you and they will never do anything to hurt me. I admit that I did lie about you 15 years ago, but it's been a long time since then, so stop being so selfish and try to move on from the past. You are unmarried and childless anyway, so why don't you want to help them out by paying for their repairs and renovations around the house? Do the right thing and be a better daughter." Reading that message felt like a knife being plunged into my chest. The audacity it took for him to dismiss my struggles while trying to guilt-trip me with my status as unmarried and childless was infuriating. It underscored just how little he understood my journey and the sacrifices I had made. The insistence that I should prioritize their needs over my own well-being was not only offensive but also reflective of a profound lack of empathy on his part. Frustration bubbled up within me, mixed with a fierce desire for justice. It was time to take matters into my own hands and unveil the truth that had long been hidden. I sat down to compose an email directed not just to my parents but also to close relatives, detailing the painful experiences of my childhood and the unfair treatment I had endured while living under my family's roof. In this email, I painted a vivid picture of the oppressive environment that had been my reality and contrasted it sharply with how my brother had been treated. I took a bold step in recounting the malicious, unfounded rumors my brother had spread about me during our school years, which had severely tarnished my reputation. I didn't hold back in expressing how my parents had cast me aside, and I stressed that without my grandmother's support, I might not have even survived. Towards the conclusion of my email, I included the text my brother had sent me, attaching a screenshot where he admitted to lying about me. This served as irrefutable evidence of the toxic dynamics that had defined our family. It was time for the truth to be exposed, and for the scales of justice to tilt in my favor after so long. It was an unmistakable confession, a bold statement that I hoped would finally bring to light the lies that had lingered far too long. Just an hour ago, I hit send on the email that I had meticulously crafted, pouring my heart and experiences into each line. I steeled myself for the inevitable chaos that would ensue once my parents and brother got their hands on it. There was a sense of dread mixed with anticipation as I braced myself for their reactions. I promised to keep you updated on how my family responded to my email, knowing full well that their response would be anything but calm. It has been a month since my last update, and so much has transpired during this time. As could be expected, my family did erupt once they read the email. The fallout was intense, with my parents facing criticism from relatives who were previously in the dark about the extent of the favoritism and emotional abuse I had endured. Many family members reached out to me, expressing their shock and sorrow at not being there for me when I needed support. Their apologies, while appreciated, also brought to the surface the realization of how deep-rooted these issues had been within our family dynamics. My brother and parents bombarded me with a torrent of text messages that escalated quickly into more abusive and violent territory. This was a turning point for me. I could no longer tolerate their behavior. In light of this, I made the decision to consult with a lawyer. They drafted a cease and desist notice that I sent to my family, warning them to refrain from contacting me or risk facing serious legal repercussions. Surprisingly, this move seemed to have a chilling effect on them, as they ceased all communication. On a more positive note, my grandmother has been a source of unwavering support throughout this ordeal. She wholeheartedly believes that I did the right thing by revealing the truth to everyone, and her encouragement has been incredibly meaningful to me. Her opinion carries significant weight in my life, and knowing that I have her backing has been a great comfort. Now, it's been 2 months since my last update, and I am pleased to share that my life has taken a positive turn. On the professional front, my content writing business is thriving, and I continue to receive invitations to speak at various seminars and podcasts. This not only cements my position as a respected figure in my field but also fills me with a sense of accomplishment and validation. On a personal level, my relationship with my grandmother has grown even closer. I recently took a break from work to spend quality time with her, which has been a delightful distraction. She has taken up gardening and passionately introduced me to the world of flowers and herbs. Our shared moments, whether we are enjoying meals together, engaging in heartfelt discussions, or simply relishing each other's company, are among my most treasured memories. Since the lawyer's communication to my family, they have not attempted to contact me, which brings me a sense of relief. I'm focusing on my own well-being and have recently begun attending therapy sessions to aid in my healing process. This feels like a significant step for me, one that I hope will bring continued growth and recovery. For now, I believe this will be my last update, as I continue to navigate this new chapter in my life.